Inspirational Creatives, episode 187. Welcome to Inspirational Creatives. I'm your host, Rob Lawrence. Join me every Friday as I chat with successful artists, producers, and creative entrepreneurs who share powerful stories and strategies. They can help you to create the life that you want. Listen each week as these inspirational creatives show you how to take your creativity to the next level. You'll learn how to create a sustainable business that inspires others and gives you the financial freedom and lifestyle that you want. Thanks for listening. Make sure you sign up at inspirationalcreatives.com to get free exclusive bonus material. And now, on with the show. Rob here and welcome to another episode of Inspirational Creatives. My guest today is somebody who is a performer, a singer, a producer, activist, coach and voiceover artist who runs her own music production company for film, television and stage and is the voice of the popular story Twilight. She was recently introduced to me by my previous guest, Ariel Hyatt, and I'm excited to chat with her today about her own story and what it takes to develop a career in the arts, the spoken word and music industry. Having recently launched her own podcast with her husband, who is a composer and a musician, it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you today Ilyana Kadshuin. Ilyana, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Rob. I'm happy to be here.
Delighted to have you on the show today. How would you describe who you are and what it is that you do today, Ilyana?
I would say I am a performer and a producer with strong activist tendencies. As a performer and a producer, I'm a storyteller, plain and simple, whatever the medium. As a performer, I've worked in all the mediums, stage, film, TV, voiceover, music. As a producer, produce film, music events. And I'm also a teaching artist who teaches about the art of the voice and using it in public. So there's a lot in there. I've done a lot, but I enjoy it all and I find it interconnected.
That's fascinating. Where to start, really? There's so much I'd love to ask you about all of that. Let's start here. Let's go back to the beginning. I read that you were born in Miami and you grew up in Maryland and you had the opportunity to travel with your parents to the Soviet Union. So I'm really keen to know, what was the reality of those early experiences forming the young Ilyana?
I love it. I don't often get to talk about that. Miami is a blur because I was a small baby and a child. Maryland was very idyllic, small town suburban life for a kid. I really feel like, where we played imagination games in the backyard for hours with no technology. And one of the things that my parents, I think was quite a unique part of my background was that my parents traveled a lot around the world and took me with them. I was a part of it. So, which of course planted a travel bug in me. But the particular trip to the Soviet Union, that really did change my universe because I was quite young. We are talking about the Soviet Union during a pre-Gorbachev, pre-Chernobyl. So I was a young kid, and the Soviet Union, Russia looked very different than it looks today. It was sort of what we would imagine of an older Soviet Union, where bread lines and water lines and huge disparity gaps between the wealthy and the non-wealthy. The westernization of Soviet Union came later. So this was, we're talking, way back. And it changed my universe because it was part of my ancestry. My background is Eastern European on both sides. And it just showed me that there's a big world out there. So as a young kid, I became very curious, very aware that there was more than just us here in the United States. So in all of those ways, it was, you can imagine, a pretty big deal for a 10-year-old, 9 or 10-year-old, however old I was.
That's amazing. So one of the things that springs to my mind is that you obviously had a very high level of curiosity as a child, and this must have been fascinating to you, this completely different world. What I'd love to know is how you've managed to maintain that level of curiosity, because you strike me as a very creative, prolific almost person. And I guess to be able to feed that level of creativity, you've got to remain intensely curious. And I recognize it's something that through schools and society these days, that's something that seems to kind of almost get drummed out of people, is their curiosity. How have you managed to retain yours?
Because I value it. And because I saw the value. I saw that as a young age, the more curious I was. I mean, there's all those terrible expressions, curiosity killed the cat, like there's all this sort of lore about don't be curious, just kind of stick with what you're doing and what you know. But I've started to see the value in it. And it was probably something that very much led to me becoming aware of and finding my creative abilities. So they were linked. I saw them as linked. And maybe that's what kept me to continue to be a curious person.
How have those early impressions formed the person you are today, do you think?
I think that the curiosity led me to try things and be experimental and exploratory. And when you do that, you then go out and have more experiences in your life as opposed to only sticking with the routines So I think that just kept enhancing my life and therefore enhancing my character. I always talk with people a lot about building your own character, your own personality, and that the more character you have, the more you have to offer the world. And there's only one way to really build character, which is to go out and live. So I think those things are all connected.
And how do you feel you first found your creative abilities? Can you remember some of those early times when you realized that you had certain talents and what it was that you were good at?
Yeah, that's really interesting. Maybe as a child and a teenager, you may or may not notice your own enthusiasm for something. You're aware of it. And I'm talking about in the general sense of the general population. Maybe some people as kids and teens, okay, you start to notice I really like sports, or I really like art, or I really like music. You may notice your enthusiasm and your energy. And what we won't notice is that sometimes, or maybe we do, that others don't have the same enthusiasm, right? You'll be like, I really love painting. And other people will be like, I don't love that at all. You'll start to sort of feel like, what you have enthusiasm for, you may, as a child and a teen, think, oh, everybody loves this, or is it just me? You start to have those sort of perception changes. Public speaking, for instance. This is something that is coined as the greatest fear, one of the greatest fears that people have. And for me, I always loved talking in front of people. And so that sort of naturally grew. And I guess I took that for granted. Like, doesn't everybody love talking in front of everybody? And then at a certain point, you go, oh no, no, that's not true at all. People have really distinct loves and interests, and we're not all the same. And then as you grow into a young adult, you would start to notice maybe what skills in that area that you have, or what skills that you have to develop in that said area. So it was like, to me, I guess, a progression of your own awareness of your interest, how it relates to other people in the world, and then what skills you either naturally have or may have to sharpen up and start training more. So I'd say that's, in a sense, how it progressed for me.
Yeah, that's awesome. Were there any particular things that you really enjoyed doing as a child that still show up in your life today?
Well, the classic story, this is a really funny image for me still, is that my parents walked into my room and I was holding, and I may have been only, somewhere 6 to 8 range. They had given me a cassette recorder that I could, just a basic one that I could record my own voice. And they walked into my bedroom. And, most kids 6 to 8 are doing other things. I was talking into the machine, pretending to be a newscaster. It was essentially like, hey, this is Ilyana for NBC News. And they just had no idea where I was getting that from. I was talking, imparting information, using my voice in really specific ways. And they were just sort of like, wow, she's practicing using her voice. And I've gone on to, in many different ways, use my voice professionally in voiceover, but also in coaching and teaching. And so I guess that just shows that at a really young age, I tapped into the voice and the power that I could wield in my voice if I understood it and, what to do with it. But that's sort of the classic childhood moment for me.
That's amazing. Yeah, casting your mind back to then, you've almost hinted at it there, really, I think. But, what was it about that experience that inspired you?
I guess just that it was captured and that you could do different things with it. So the recorded voice versus the live, which again, I've gone on to really work with predominantly in my career, both using my voice in live situations and recorded situations. But I guess it's just that it's you. I started to feel like, oh, this voice is me. This voice is intimately me. And I wonder what it can do or what it's reflecting out. And again, taking for granted that that was something that everybody else was doing. And then I quickly realized no one was exploring their voice, like unless they were in, really traditional situations, like maybe taking a chorus group in school and singing. But besides that, people were deathly afraid of having to talk in front of each other in class or do anything that involved having to talk in front of everyone. I mean, people couldn't think about the terror that people have sitting at the dinner table talking to their own families. Yes. So talking out loud holds a great amount of power.
It's funny because in the same way that there's so many people out there that fear public speaking, I know that there are a lot of people out there too which fear their own voice on tape, as I would call it, but hearing their voice recorded too. So it's really interesting that you say that. For you, it was a very natural thing.
Yes, exactly. It just, listen, we all have things that come out of us that are natural, and then other things that we have to train a bit. But we all have our own natural abilities. Some people can just bake a pie without a lot of stress. And for other people, that would be incredibly stressful. So we all have those things that we just are innate in our chemistry and in our makeup. So the key is about figuring out what those things are.
So there you were as a young child figuring this stuff out. How did that translate into the work that you do today? What came next, and how did that turn into what is now essentially a full-time career?
So, I mean, you would take this awareness and this curiosity, enthusiasm, and I just tried things out early on. Being an explorer with my creative self was key, because how do you know what you can do if you don't, dip a toe in? There's a gender difference here where men are known for trying to see if they can without knowing that they're an expert at something first, whereas women feel like they have to be an expert or really good at something before they try it. I've seen that gender divide in front of me as I grew up, and that doesn't really serve us. I think we need to equally, as men and women, really try things out and see what is possible before we sort of close the door. As far as specifics of what I do and how it unfolded, I mean, I went to New York University Tisch School of the Arts, and that was such a great hub of creativity. And it was an exciting time when I was at NYU at Tisch in the 90s, and it felt like an incubator of ideas and creative energy. So I feel like that just kind of gave me a lot of juice. And then after graduating, it was just really about following leads and ideas that arose either in me or things, that I saw reflected outside in the world. So it became this process of exploring, going to school and really seeing what I had in me as a performer, as an artist. And that particular school that I went to at Tisch School of the Arts was called Experimental Theater Wing. I just had the great pleasure this past fall of being, for the first time, asked to be an adjunct faculty there teaching speech and public speaking to their upper level students. So going back to my alma mater was a pleasure.
Yeah.
So taking that education and then going out in the world and really following the leads and seeing what kind of opportunities were out there for me, that's sort of how I got sort of my start.
Yeah, I love that. Were you encouraged to go to an art school?
Yeah, I was. And interestingly enough, there really were not a lot of artists in my family. My family is filled with psychologists. We've got psychologists, psychotherapists, neurobehavioral psychologists, psychological researchers, a lot of thinkers. And then on the other side, some people that were in the service industry, and like I had a grandfather who was like a tailor. I mean, really, it's not as if I came from a background of a lot of performers. There's a lot of people that get into the business because it's a fait accompli. Their family was in it. That wasn't it for me. But I think that psychological influence, because if you talk, some of my professors at NYU would say that acting is psychology turned into behavior. When you look at actors up on the screen or up on stage, they're taking psychological things that we all go through as human beings, and they're turning them into visible behavior that the audience can see. To a certain degree, all that psychology that I had influencing me as a kid, I then just used it in a different way than my family did, and started seeing how I could use it in the creative field. And my family was very encouraging, because their philosophy as psychologists was about living your truth. I imagine that they saw a great many people in their practice and patients that were not living their truth and were quite unhappy. So even if something is going to be a difficult path or not a straight line, they did encourage, and say it could be difficult and a lot of work and challenging at times, but is this what you want to do? So when I announced that I did want to get closer and closer to New York and go to Tisch, they were, not giving me any resistance on that.
Did you encounter any resistance from anyone during that time?
About being myself or about being an artist?
Yeah, both really.
I would say probably the greatest resistance would have just been my own doubt and uncertainty in myself. I mean, that's always the strongest resistance that we have to fight against, because we may put a tremendous amount of power on the resistance we feel from other people or the negating or the criticism that we feel outside of ourselves. But the reality is that doesn't hold the biggest power. And of course, I'm saying this now after having some years and reflecting on it. But in reality, our greatest challenge is the resistance we have in ourselves, because that is the most sticky one. It's easy to go, okay, this person didn't like what I did or doesn't believe in what I do. Okay, it hurts and it stings for a moment, but the reality is you can still get out of bed and keep going. It's your own doubts and resistance to what you want to do that can linger the longest, because it's your brain and it's your mind doing that. And I imagine for many people, it takes some years to unravel that hold. And the sooner you can let go of that, you can get out of your own way and you can really do what you're meant to do. It's very strong. And, some people, I don't know, maybe, and again, this is coming from a psychology background. Maybe some people need to unravel that in therapy. Maybe some people need to unravel that by doing something really challenging in their life, like climbing Mount Everest. Or for me, I studied martial arts. I went and got my black belt in a Korean martial art called Hapkido. This was a big deal for me because I can be kind of a scaredy cat, cautious gal. Saying that I was going to do this was a big deal. And I think in a way, this was me just saying, you know what, I'm tired of being afraid. I'm tired of doubting myself. I just need to do something that really throws me out of my comfort zone. And it did. It changed my mindset. It changed my ability to get out of the holds of the sort of self-bondage that we have and just say, let's get out there and be active and manifest things as opposed to sitting and stewing in that doubt. So that is it's a very powerful thing.
Yeah, that's fascinating. That's really, really insightful. It sounds to me like you taking up martial arts was really beneficial to your confidence.
Absolutely. Confidence, motivation, self-discipline. I mean, to be an artist, you have to be incredibly disciplined with your own energy, with your own ideas. So yeah, confidence, big time.
Yeah. I was going to ask you about what motivates you. I'm really interested to learn about how the martial arts helps with your motivation too.
When you're scared, there were times in martial arts where if you didn't pay attention and really bring everything that you had to those moments in the school where I was studying, you could get hurt. So it was this lesson in how strong it is to pay attention, and that mindfulness and awareness can be very motivating. When we're kind of zoned out, it takes our energy away. So I was motivated by that ability to harness my own energy. So, that was a big part of motivating me out of doubt and fear and into the world. But I'm also, as I said in my intro about being a performer and a producer with activist tendencies, I am motivated by a sense of activism that myself, that I want to affect change, to be of service in the world. I have this relentless need to make things better in the world, which can be very, which can be a double-edged sword to have that in you all the time, because it's incredibly motivating, but then at times it can be incredibly disheartening because I can't unplug from it. And even when I look out in the world and there's all these things that I can't always affect, but still, it's still a gasoline. It still motivates me, this need to affect change. So I gravitate towards work, and always have, that has a possibility of this.
That's fascinating. What do you think's behind that particular sort of activist motivation that you talk about, this almost restlessness that you have to create change, positive change. Where do you think that comes from?
Well, for a long time, it was just about becoming an artist and then having fun with that, which you should do, and then entertaining people. But then at a certain point, just to create and be an artist and a performer, to solely entertain, stopped being enough, satisfying enough for me. And I love entertaining people, and I'm a storyteller and a professional storyteller, and I love taking people on journeys and tickling their imagination and all that. And I know we need those escapes and that inspiration, but in a larger sense, well, it would probably also have to be that at a certain point, my artist and activist became fused after I started doing more and more projects that fused them. And then I just wanted that to keep having that experience. I did a project connected with Amnesty International about women and children and sex trafficking, where I was an actress in a piece of documentary theater that basically showed the audience what was happening to women and children all over the world being sold into sex trafficking. And the performances would then go into these Q&A talkbacks with audience, and we'd have incredible panels of people from the United Nations and FBI trafficking task force. And I started to feel as an artist, I'm a part of something here that's not just entertaining the audience, it's illuminating something for them that they maybe walked in not knowing. And now within this task force and the UN, maybe something will happen after this. And just that seed of an idea that art would cause some sort of change potentially, or people talking that weren't talking before. I was hooked from that experience and did a lot of things like that after that experience. And that was it. That was motivating me from that moment on.
That's amazing. It sounds to me like you could see how art not only is a tool, if that's the right word, for education and entertainment, but it's also something that can really affect change as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, fascinating. You mentioned discipline a moment ago. So let's talk a little bit about that and your own creative process. I'm very interested to learn more about that and how you get into the zone before your performances, and also what you do to perhaps keep your creative talents and inspiration sharp.
So the creative process in the zone, I love that. I love that question. I mean, now on this side of my experience, I realize that what that really means is getting present, mindfulness, and present in a relaxed and ready way, not present in a, oh my God, what's going to happen, tense way, but present in a relaxed and ready way. And it's funny because the zone I always thought that I needed to be in the past was something that was not present. I always thought that I had to conjure something else to make myself get to what I needed to be. But the zone is really the here and the now. How can you bring you and all you possess with precision? Again, that sort of sense of control and precision, but also your own personal flair if you're not in the moment and present. And it's when I would zone out. So it's not zoning in, but zoning out, things would fall apart because I wasn't present. People think, I need to get myself into the zone to create, and they are actually zoning out. So you need to zone in, get present. As far as feeding creative talents and keeping my inspiration sharp, I mean, my fun answer is the idea that you take in the world like it's all art. All life in front of you is like art. Somebody walking down the street, somebody you see at work, the buildings around you, the life you see, somebody walking a dog, it's all art. And you take it in like it's part of your creative process. And then you stop feeling so annoyed by life, let's say, or judgmental of life. You start to see yourself as it's all creative inspiration. My practical answer to this is that whatever your creative area is, practicing what you do, the act of it, that will close the distance between you and it, and it will strengthen the muscle of what you do, like a workout. So the more, whatever your talent is, the more you do your talent, it stays sharp and fresh. And the more sporadic and the less often you do it, the weaker it is. So that old adage of practicing your talent, and we all battle that because there's just some days you don't feel like doing it, sharpening your skills, but maybe that idea of taking in the world as art will help feed your inspiration and motivation to keep doing. If you're a visual artist, or you're a speaker, or you're a radio host, whatever it is, if you take in the world like it's art and inspiration, maybe it will keep you inspired to practice every day to keep things, sharp and fresh.
Is that a regular challenge for you? I recognize it's a regular challenge for a lot of artists and creative people I know, not being in the right mood to practice, if you see what I mean.
Yes.
Is that a resistance that you often encounter? And if so, how do you overcome it?
Yeah, it's something that I've encountered in myself. Absolutely. And there's not a person that doesn't encounter this. And not even, you don't even have to be a creative artist. It could just be human who's in business or whatever. We all battle that feeling of, I only want to do this when I'm inspired to do it. And if I've listened to great interviews with people that I admire, that I consider mentors and teachers, and the reality is that they talk about that idea of like, you can't always do that. That sometimes we have to start and then the inspiration follows. That if we always wait for this motivated, inspirational feeling to go, okay, well, now I'm going to get back to writing my novel, or now I'm going to get back to creating the podcast I want to create, or whatever, you're going to be waiting and waiting and waiting. So that idea of getting present, waking up, looking out at the world and taking in that inspiration, and then just really saying, I've got to, again, that's where the martial arts came in, that discipline, because we all need that discipline. It's very easy in this overwhelming world with a lot of things going on that are not great all the time. And we can want to shut down and be overwhelmed, and that can affect that whole process. And to a certain degree, we can't let it, because it could always affect it.
Got it. That's fascinating. A couple of questions around that I'd love to ask you. One is, how do you find presence? What rituals do you partake in to kind of become present? And also, how do you find the discipline to do that as an artist? What rituals or methods do you have so that you can remain disciplined around your art?
So zoning in, as I was talking about, or waking up, to me, that is very connected to the discipline. So I'll talk about them together. I mean, some sort of meditation process I find helpful. And it doesn't have to be sitting down with your eyes closed in a temple that's quiet either. There's a lot of active meditations. You can meditate while you're cooking. You can meditate while you walk down the street. What it is it's about turning down the noise outside and in your own head and being like, here I am. I'm here. I'm here. This is me. I'm here in the world. What do I feel? What do I want to do? Then you let that energy kind of churn and bubble up. And then the next piece is harnessing and controlling it. So discipline, I mean, the answer to how you find your discipline, again, is like I was saying a few minutes ago about how do people wrestle with their own self-doubt. For some, it's therapy. For some, it's a spiritual practice. For some, it's doing something really challenging, climbing a mountain, getting your black belt. For some, it's just flipping that switch inside and deciding, I'm tired of not doing what I need to do. I'm just going to create, I'm going to get up today and I'm going to be more disciplined about things. Maybe you make a schedule. For me, I will say how you get up, and I've taken in, again, information from my own mentors and teachers, how you start the day. So if you can start the day with a little bit of a disciplined approach of maybe a small meditation, maybe, a bit of some exercise, writing down some thoughts, just sort of doing a mind purge to sort of empty out the mind, it sets you up for the rest of the day so that your work and anything that you want to do is not cluttered by the gunk, so to speak. So I would say, those things are connected, and you've got to find your own methods. But I mean, those are some things you could try.
What I particularly love about that is two things. One, it's about how you start your day. But secondly, which is really inspirational to hear, is that it's almost like discipline is, there's no one size that fits all. It's all about finding your own way of finding your own discipline in that sense.
Yeah, and finding out what's in the way of it. So if you do have to go into therapy because there's maybe some emotional thing that's blocking you from having it, or maybe somebody needs to just have a physical experience like climbing a mountain because it's just their own courage that's getting, you have to, again, be an explorer and say, what's going to work for me to cultivate some more discipline?
Amazing. I want to come back to what you were talking about earlier, about early in your career where you were finding leads and ideas. And I'm really interested to know how you create the luck that you have, because, looking at your portfolio, it's wide and varied. You've had some amazing opportunities by the looks of things. What's been your secret in terms of finding work and creating some of those opportunities?
Lately, teaching at NYU and the New School and some other private acting studios, I've had to talk about this with people that are in the beginnings of their career. And I started to distill a few things. One is this idea of your own reputation, meaning your past work, being a professional, a talent that people like to work with, that they like not only your creative talent that you have, but they like working with you. So I say that to people in that idea of really giving that weight, that it's not just about what you do, but also about how you are to work with, that kind of holds this reputation of, oh yeah, I want to work with them. They were not only good at what they do, but they were enjoyable to work with. And that connects to what I also, suggest to people about the power that is in networking, meeting new people, putting yourself out there to network and create those new opportunities, and then also making your own opportunities. And how do you do that? I would say, again, it's about paying attention to your own interests and then looking out in that networking that you've done and who you know and seeing how you can link up something that you've been interested in and who's out there that that's in that field that you can start getting your feet wet in. I mean, in terms of me getting into the audiobook world and Twilight and producing documentary films and creating my Alzheimer's music program, all of those, I followed a signal that came to me, an interest, like, ooh, sometimes that signal of interest comes as envy, right? We look out in the world, we go, I want to do what that person is doing. Or you might start feeling bad about yourself, like, I want to do that. They get to do that. Actually, instead of feeling guilty about having that feeling, pay attention. Okay, well, what is it about? That person wrote a book and is touring with it, or this person, did this film about this. And so follow the thread of that interest. And that's a signal, and go, okay, I need to pay attention to this. I seem to have a strong connection to me to do that work. Okay, now take that and think about your network. Who do you know that works in that arena that you could have a conversation, take them to coffee, find out about an event, the word audacious comes to mind, be bold and courageous and say, I want to do that. I'm going to put myself out there for that opportunity. The other big thing is that there's a fear out there for anybody that's listening, maybe that's early in their creative career and thinking about doing this and sees all the challenge of it. And one of the biggest challenges that artists or creatives see specifically is merging art and commerce. So monetizing, right? So you have two choices. Otherwise, you do other work, you do, let's say, a job to make a living and pay your bills so that you can just subsidize your creative work. Somebody says, I want to be a painter, so I'm going to do this job as a secretary in a law office to pay my bills so that I can just paint for the joy of it. And then there's other people that say, no, it's a little bit bigger than that for me. So I need to monetize that creative work. How's that woman going to monetize her paintings? So for artists, they get very... it's a fearful, stress, challenging approach to merge art and commerce. And I think it's one of the things that keeps people from doing their creative work. And you have to change your point of view on that. That's a big, big part.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, what do you think the key is to changing that point of view so that they could potentially become full-time artists?
I mean, wouldn't it be your own belief in the work and the power of the work? Because otherwise you'd say, I'm just enjoying the process. And that's fine. If you say, I want to paint, and I'm just using that as an example, I just want to paint because I just enjoy the process and what it does for me. But if you have a deeper drive, because you feel like your art is meant to do X, Y, Z and be in front of certain audiences and do certain things, then you have to take that as a belief and really conjure that in a motivating sense and believe that you should and are deserved to monetize it. And I can't underscore that enough, because if you don't believe it should be monetized, you won't. You just won't.
Yeah.
It'll stay in its box, that it is. I mean, all the greatest motivational speakers and people out there, I mean, it really starts with your own emotional unwinding around something to really have, and it's not hocus pocus. Oh, I believe it should be monetized, so it will. I'm not saying that. We've been talking about motivation and discipline, rolling up your sleeves and saying, okay, now how can I do this? How can this become? And again, that's going to really depend on the type of creative art you're doing and the kind of path that you want to walk with it. But it's an internal job, if that makes sense.
It does make sense, yeah. I love that. And there are so many things in there which are just really, really inspiring. And I think that's really, really nice to hear. I'd love to talk about the Ilyana today. You're a very well-respected voiceover artist and public speaking coach, somebody who uses their voice for a living, and you do so many other things too. What does a typical day look like for you, if there is such one? And how do your projects tend to unfold? What's your lifestyle like?
So voice performing is really, this idea of wielding the voice for these different needs and outcomes. And it's all public speaking to a certain degree. So you know your voice, know how to use it and wield it, and really enjoy using it to, whether you're being asked to communicate an idea or entertain or sell an idea. Those are the keys if you really want to do it for a living. That's when it starts to feel like you really enjoy wielding your voice. I know both sides as both a voice performer and a voice coach, as you just mentioned, and I really enjoy both. I so enjoy performing with my voice, and I really enjoy, as a coach, supporting and motivating people into finding their way to enjoy speaking in public arenas, because it's so hard for people to just enjoy it and to enjoy communicating their content and their ideas. I've learned that I'm very motivated by that as well. And I really genuinely enjoy how to work with each person in front of me to have them communicate their content and ideas. I've worked with people in the business world. I've worked with artists who are pitching ideas. Again, business people that are talking to, other business people. It really doesn't matter, because it's all content and ideas and communication where people have to reach each other and connect. So typical days, there are no typical days for me. My days are all over the place. Some days I'm voice performing, some days I'm coaching, some days I'm doing my podcast, some days I'm doing my work with people with Alzheimer's. And I like that variety, because I started to see, like looking at the world as a giant piece of art, I also see everything I do as connected. And that helps motivate me through my day, where I might wake up on a particular day and go, oh, I don't necessarily feel like doing this today. I wish I was doing this. But instead of being a slave to that mental idea, I just say, you know what? It's all connected. It's all the power of the voice. It's all storytelling. It's all motivating. And that kind of helps me deal with any challenges I might have on a particular day.
Yeah, that's really exciting to hear it that way, that you see everything as connected. Because I know a lot of artists, and to some degree myself included, sometimes we feel that everything we do is completely unrelated. But to see it in a more related fashion, I can see how that is intrinsically motivating. A couple of things you mentioned there I'm really curious to know more about. You mentioned you work with folks with Alzheimer's. What's involved there?
So along the line of the artist and the activist, during Hurricane Sandy in New York, there was a lot of damage. And a particular area that was damaged was a lot of senior citizen elder residences along the shoreline in New York. And a lot of those seniors were displaced and put in shelters. And one night, my husband and I, James and I, were going to a shelter to just see what they needed. And I walked into this big shelter and saw, hundreds and hundreds of beds of senior citizens. And I just had this light bulb moment where I said, this is shameful. We are not respecting our elders. It just felt like a big visual red flag to me of devaluing of people that are aging. And I said to myself, what is it that I already do in my life that could be connected to this? And I'm a musician, a storyteller, a public speaker. And so we went back and played some concerts, some interactive concerts for the people in the shelters. But that day and that storm was a light bulb moment for me to create my program, which is called Stories Love Music. And we've won a couple of grants over the past couple of years. And it's a marriage of storytelling and music for both the elderly that are losing their memory due to dementia and Alzheimer's, and for their caregivers. And it's been a powerful experience for me to see the power of what I do to make someone's life more meaningful, more dignified. I have plans for that program to really expand it nationally so that more and more people can be a part of making the life of someone that's growing older and losing their memory more meaningful. And so it's become a very important thing in my work.
Yeah, fascinating. You mentioned working with your husband there, and I know you've recently launched a podcast. I'd love to learn more about that and the story behind the podcast.
Oh, the podcast is called the Know I Know podcast. And Know I Know is kind of an expression that my husband, James Harrell, who's a composer and a sound designer at Lithion Music with me, we're two only children that got married. And so we're both kind of have this feisty know-it-all spirit with each other. So Know I Know is sort of like somebody will be talking to the other person. They'll go, no, I know. It's sort of that shorthand, like you know. So we were like, oh, that would be a good podcast name. Because then we co-host this podcast, Know I Know, as husband and wife. And we talk about what is it like to create and work with a person that you're married to. Okay, that's a big thing. We also bring in special guests from all walks of life that can teach us and let us know that we don't know everything. We actually don't know everything. And the audience has these ideas that can change our lives. You know, we talk to the audience with the guests. The guests can change our lives. They create special calls to action for the audience based on the topic. Plus, we play live music and we do fun audio treats. And honestly, it is one of the favorite things I've done in my life so far. Like, I have been enjoying it. As you know, podcasting is wonderful, and I love talking to people like we're doing right now. It's just been one of my most favorite things I've done. You know, I would love for people to check it out. It's on iTunes, it's on Stitcher Radio. It's a blast.
That's fantastic. I haven't had a chance to check it out. I'm so inspired by what you had to say there. I'm absolutely going to be checking that out.
Yay! We did like 18 episodes last year, and we're about to, in about a week or so, we'll be launching our new 2017 episodes. So yeah, I'll be interested to hear what you have to say about it.
Amazing. Make sure you send me the link and I'll put that in the episode show notes. Reflecting on everything that we've talked about today, what have been some of the biggest lessons and insights that you've had in your life so far? You know, what advice would you give to a younger Ilyana?
Well, just what's sticking out from our conversation today is about self-doubt and resistance. Self-doubt and resistance, it takes a lot of energy. It's exhausting. It actually takes so much more energy than people know. And also arrogance and false confidence, that's not it either. So it's not about, self-doubt, resistance, I can't do this, or false arrogance, false confidence. It's not those extremes. Waking up is that happy medium, right? Just waking up and being willing and curious, that actually gives you energy and motivation. People are always like, what is the secret? Where's energy? Where's motivation? They'll ask me, how are you so energetic and focused? And it's not a magic bean. It's not a magic pill. You know, it would be great if that was true, but it's not. It's waking up and just being willing and curious to get out from underneath that stuff and to be experimental with your talents that actually can fill you with the energy and the motivation to tackle things like art, merging art and commerce, all those overwhelming things, taking in the things that are going on around you and seeing it as art, and having more gratitude for the things that you do have. That keeps you positive, and it's just really waking up. It's deceptively simple sounding.
Yeah. It's like you were saying earlier, in some respects, it's about what it isn't rather than what it is sometimes. And it's kind of clearing away that distraction and the mental clutter that we end up with.
Oh, yeah.
You mentioned gratitude there. I'd love to know, what are you grateful for today?
I'm always grateful for my friends and family. I mean, never underestimate your community, what you get out of your community. Family and friends, there's a yogic term called satsang, which is about the people that you spend time with, that actually says a lot about you. And it actually is highly, highly influential. So if you can take gratitude, if you can look around you at your friends and family and genuinely feel like, they are good and good for you and you have a good friendship, family, community circle, that is something to be valued. And I'm just also really grateful for the creativity, the creative life that I live and that I love, because it's a state that, as I was talking about before, is more living my truth.
Yeah, I love that. What's inspired you recently?
Oh, wow. Recently films, because I vote in some of the film awards. And so I get to kind of binge over holiday seasons on films. And I just love storytelling, as I was saying in the beginning, as a performer and a producer. So looking at all these glorious films that have been made over the last year and knowing how hard, having worked in film, knowing how hard it is to make movies when people are so committed to telling a story and they, stick with it and turn out this incredible film, that always inspires me. And just people's stories in general. It's been a crazy season here, last, year in the United States. And I'm inspired by people's fortitude to stick with their own beliefs and be courageous with their philosophies on life, even if they're uncertain as to, we have to agree to disagree. So whenever I see people having the courage to talk with people about things that are challenging, I'm always inspired by that.
That's fascinating. Yeah. How would you define success to you today? When
I'm successfully bringing my artistry and my activism together and I feel like I'm affecting change, that feels successful. When I have the courage to merge the art and the commerce and allow myself to monetize what I do and to stay on that path, to give all of that I have and to feel like I'm being given in return. I mean, those are successes to me, both externally and internally.
And I think something that you said earlier in our conversation really inspired me was this sense of seeing the wider effects of how your art can change the world.
Yeah, the wider lens.
So before we wrap up then, in context of everything that we've spoken about today, is there anything you'd like to add?
Oh, I think that this was wonderful, because when you zero in on this process of life, but specifically having to do with the creative process, I think it's really important to unpack this a bit so it demystifies what's happening and what can be done. But I think I feel like we really did zero in on some important issues, and I hope it's helpful for your audience.
Yeah, absolutely. So finally, what's next for you, Ilyana?
Well, more totally fun, fulfilling episodes of the Know I Know podcast, my Stories Love Music Alzheimer's program, expanding that, documentary films that I'm a part of that'll be coming out in educational ways out in the world. Just my work is always sort of in progress, because a lot of these bigger projects take time. So that kind of commitment and perseverance is always really important, because they go through chapters, things that you're working on. But if people want to keep up with, what I'm working on, my websites are out there, and I try to keep up, even as when I get really busy on my blogs and keep updated on what's happening with all of those things. But you can definitely find me out there in the social media land and keep up with what's going on.
Super. And where can our listener find out more about you and connect with you on social media?
So my music and podcasting world is Lithion Music, which is Lithion is Lythion, and then music, all one word.com. That's where they can read about what we've done music, like in terms of on films and commercials and our podcast. But then IlyanaKadshuin.com has me as an individual, as a performer and activist, what I've been working on. I also have a coaching, Ilyana Kadshuin coaching. I try to keep those things nicely separate so people can read about what they want to read about, whether they want to find out how I coach or what I do as a performer or what my music company. So there's lots of sites out there. I can send you all the links.
Please do, yeah. And I'll make sure I include those on the episode show notes. Ilyana, it's been a real pleasure chatting with you today. I'm incredibly grateful for your time. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Rob. I thoroughly enjoyed breaking down this subject today. It was really inspiring for me too.
Thanks for listening. Nothing beats the stories and advice of an expert to help you raise your creative game. I would love to know what you thought about today's episode, so don't forget to subscribe in iTunes, where you can rate and review the show. If you like this episode, I invite you to share it on Facebook or Twitter with the one person you know who will benefit from the wisdom shared here today. You can find the show notes on inspirationalcreatives.com/podcast. If you have a burning question or a great idea for a guest, head on over to inspirationalcreatives.com/contact, where you can connect with me there.